a very rugged, exotic land that allows us to expose both what the vehicle is capable of, but also something about the Range Rover lifestyle.
The Testarossa was given a power increase and a cosmetic makeover, bigger brakes, and evolved into the 512 TR.
Motoring 93 is brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, your under-the-car specialists for imports and domestics.
Some say it's certainly not the prettiest on the block, but boy, does it have a great personality. No, I'm not talking about the Camel, I'm talking about the Range Rover. Hello everybody and welcome to Motoring 93. Now this Rover is fresh out of the box for 1993. As for the Camel, well, you see, this week we're in Morocco in Northwest Africa. Land Rover has invited some of North America's most influential auto journalists here to show them a vehicle that they feel is more than just a new model year. They believe this Rover is a trendsetter in the tough, competitive North American 4x4 market. The country of Morocco is ingrained with the beauty of a place eternally protected from time. In the city of Marrakesh, tourists are drawn to the souk. Attracted by the traditional handicrafts, visitors will find themselves rubbing shoulders with peasants from the nearby Atlas Mountains who come to purchase supplies. It was this background that Land Rover chose to introduce their newest sport utility vehicle to North American auto journalists.
Well, we thought this was a perfect place to showcase all the new features of our 93 Range Rover. It's a very rugged, exotic land that allows us to expose both what the vehicle is capable of, but also something about the Range Rover lifestyle, that you can rough it and also live a very elegant life. This year it's more than just a new vehicle. We're actually expanding our business, and as of August 1, we've become Land Rover of North America. To sort of signal that, we're bringing in a very special vehicle, the Defender 110. Only 500 copies of that, but that's the vehicle that people think of when they think of the name Land Rover.
The newest addition to the Range Rover lineup is called the Range Rover County LWB, or long wheelbase. They've added 8 inches to the current County with its 100-inch wheelbase. This results in more room for backseat passengers. They've added more kick to the engine with 4.2 liters, producing 200 horsepower. But the most notable change is in the suspension.
The big difference with this one compared to the one last year is the air suspension that's fitted to it. What that offers is a range of different ride heights to suit the conditions that you're in. We'll start with the lowest one, which is called the access position. That allows you to actually get in and out the car much more easily. It's 60 millimeters lower than the standard height. Then going up from that, we've got a high speed height, or we call it a low profile, which is 20 millimeters lower than standard. That provides increased stability at high speed and slightly better steering feel. Then we have the standard height, which is the same height as the Corsman vehicle. Going up from that, we have a manually selectable high profile, which is used to clear obstacles under the chassis, and it gives you a better approach and departure angle, both at the front and the rear. Then further to that, we have what we call an extended profile, which is in extreme off-road conditions, we'll try and put the wheels back on the ground for you just after you've got stuck, so you'll then be able to carry on again. This level of air suspension technology is a world first as fitted to a sports utility vehicle. On the vehicle, there's an electric onboard compressor which supplies air up to 145 psi to an air tank, which then supplies air through a valve block which is controlled electronically to the air springs to provide full self-leveling in all of the ride heights. The system is basically sealed for life. The only thing that has to be checked every 24,000 miles is the intake filter for the air compressor. Everything else is basically non-serviceable and we expect to last the life of the vehicle.
The American market is extremely important because the consumers in the American market are by far the most sophisticated in the world. They've bought more new products than any other customers. They have more choices of products. In the sports utility segment, for instance, there are 15 brands and 27 different models. So they have an incredible amount of choice. If you can be successful in this market, you can literally be successful anywhere in the world because you're going up against everybody. And you're going up against everybody's best product, products that are designed to capture the American consumer's imagination.
Well, they've taken an already very capable vehicle and they've made it even better. And the improvements they've made are probably things that people who like Range Rover now will like even more. The vehicle is more powerful, it's bigger, and it has a really capable suspension. I think for them the timing is absolutely right because they've been in business 3 or 4 years in the United States. They have loyal owner body who are probably ready to trade up for a new vehicle, and they've given them 3 or 4 very good reasons with this one to do that.
Well, I think it's definitely an advantage over coil. Of course, the other side is that it costs more money. And with the Range Rover in general, that's what you come down to is, you get more features, more sophistication, how much are you willing to pay?
And what Canadians will be paying is close to $65,000 to $70,000 with all the bells and whistles, much more than the competition.
You've been asked this question many times. People always remind you of the price of the Range Rover, but you have stuck with it, you've stuck with the design, and feel this is where it belongs.
Well, I think when you say the American consumer is very sophisticated, what the American consumer senses very clearly is value, not just price. And when you offer a good value, when your product contains all the features that people want, when it retains its resale value at a higher rate than almost any European luxury car, when it has the longevity that this vehicle has, the security, it's just a total package, and it's well worth the money that we charge.
Morocco is kind of like northern, more like desert California and Arizona without the McDonald's and Dairy Queens, from the standpoint of the topography. So it isn't that unusual from what we see normally, but it's quite a place to be, and it's always nice to be in a new country. So it's fascinating as always.
Do you miss McDonald's?
Absolutely not, but the Dairy Queens I have a little trouble with on a warm day.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
This week on Test Drive, we're in California, specifically Pebble Beach, the home of this year's US Open. Now, we're here to road test this vehicle. This is the 1993 Nissan Altima, the car that will replace the Stanza in Nissan's lineup. Superior handling characteristics are one of this car's fortes. The suspension uses a fully independent McPherson strut design with coil springs and front and rear sway bars. The neat part of the design is found in the rear setup. Here Nissan have incorporated their super tow control system. In a nutshell, the system creates a tow-in situation during cornering or braking maneuvers. Now, this is like passive four-wheel steering, if you will. This significantly improves stability and perhaps more importantly the predictability of this car. During a run through a pylon test, the car handled as well as any I have tested. Out on the open road, it successfully combines agility with a great deal of comfort. The use of the front and rear stabilizer bars reduced the amount of body roll. The heart and soul of any car is always the engine, because without the right sort of motive power, you just don't have a car with any sort of inspiration. Now, Nissan plucked this 16-valve 2.4-litre twin-cam engine right out of the 240, so it's obviously got power, and the power is rated at 150 horses and 154 pounds-feet of torque. This means this car is no slouch. It runs through the 100k mark in about 9.5 seconds, which is pretty quick for a family sedan. Standard on the SE model and optional on the XE and GXE models of the Altima is a 4-sensor, 4-channel anti-lock brake system. During the brake test, this system ensured flawless stops that averaged just 114 feet from 80k. Elsewhere in the safety-related field, all the usual items are in place, including a standard driver's side airbag. The interior of the Altima is tastefully finished, with all major controls being simply and logically laid out. All the usual power options, windows, locks and mirrors are in place, as well as steering wheel mounted cruise control buttons. The heater and air conditioning controls feature large buttons for air direction and a nice slide control for temperature. The instruments are of the analog variety, making them very easy to read and interpret at a glance. The rear seat environment is comfortable, offering generous amounts of both head and legroom.
For some strange reason, Nissan seem to have an aversion to a 60-40 split folding rear seat. Now, in fairness, they've added this small pass-through for 4x2s and hockey sticks and stuff like that. But to be quite frank, it really doesn't cut the mustard, especially when you consider the Camry and the Accord both offer the split folding rear seats.
The trunk is large enough to accommodate a full complement of luggage, and the lift-over eliminates the fear of back strain when loading or unloading. As I mentioned, the large displacement four-cylinder engine has plenty of power, and the broad torque spread ensures good response throughout the operating range. Matched with this engine is a slick-shifting 5-speed manual transmission. The gear ratios have been selected such that you can derive the very best from the engine in every gear. Combine this with a light progressive clutch and you have one of the better setups in the industry. There is a 4-speed automatic available for those that want it. When equipped with a 5-speed, the car returns a good average fuel economy of around 31 miles per gallon. Nissan claim the Altima combines the efficiency of a 4-cylinder car with the power of a 6. Maybe so, but the mindset of the older, wealthier buyer thereafter demands a 6. Many won't even consider a 4 regardless of how good it actually is. That said, this car is the undisputed king of the 4s, easily surpassing the performance offered by its major competitors, the Toyota Camry, Honda Accord and Mazda 626 Kronos. Next week on Test Drive, we look at Volvo's North American debut of a front-wheel driver.
You know, here in Morocco, the camel is just as important in getting from A to B as the vehicle. Now, these guys represent 2-cylinder models, and get this, you fill them up once, and he'll last an entire month without a refill. Not bad, eh? And they hardly ever break down, which would put one guy out of business that I know of, and that's our resident mechanic, Bill Gardner.
Well, no camel's going to put me out of business, Brad. But you know, it's a funny thing. I'll bet you they thought that the guys that make this carb cleaner were going to be in trouble when fuel-injected vehicles came out. Well, it turns out we're using just as much, maybe even more than we did when carburetors were around. Now, when you take your fuel-injected car or truck in for a tune-up, don't be surprised if there's $6 or $8 on the bill for a can of this. It's very important to use this periodically, especially if you have multi-port fuel injection. I'm going to show you where you use it and how, because it's easy, quite easy, even for an experienced guy to look right past this problem. Okay, I've loosened the clamps off on the 2 air hoses. Now, these hoses connect the engine to the air filter over on the left fender. So everything that comes through here is clean air. It's being filtered. Now, I'm going to set those aside. You can see that the throttle body in here, the item that we're talking about today, at a glance it looks really clean. These bores look really, really clean here. And you can even see the throttle blades. Those are the things that are moving in there right now. Okay, and you can see the front side of them, and it looks real clean. But when I open them up and get in there a little bit and check around, turns out there's a lot of gum in there. That's this black crud that you see on the screwdriver, and that's all around the perimeter of that bore, just behind the throttle blade, and it's around the edges of the blade. Now what happens is, when you've been cruising at a set speed, the throttle blades are open, all of a sudden you want to stop, they drop closed. Now there should be a slight air gap around them. If you held that up to a light, you'd see a tiny, tiny little bit of light around the edge of that blade. But it can fill up with that crud, and the air can't get past it, so the engine will stall when it comes back to an idle. Now, what you've got to do is get that can of cleaner in there and spray it all in and around. It foams up, and then you're going to take an old toothbrush, have somebody hold the throttle blades wide open, okay, and you're going to clean all in and around that bore. Now, I've stuck a coffee cup underneath to catch the dirty cleaner that's going to run out. You can spray quite a bit in there and go with the brush, and you can see it's coming out really black now, and that's all that carbon and gum and varnish that's in there on the back side of the throttle blade. Now, I'm using this particular cleaner, this environmentally responsible cleaner, and I found that it works the best for this operation because it foams up. You can see the white foam that it produces, and it cleans for quite a long time even after you've sprayed it on. It continues to foam up, and it gets up underneath things and cleans them on the backside, whereas a lot of cleaners only clean when you're actually jetting the cleaner on. So it works quite well. Now, this is something that should be done about once a year. It's an operation that would be done in conjunction with a tune-up. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 93.
If you have any story ideas, drop us a line at Motoring 93, Post Office Box 284, Station J, Toronto, Ontario, M4J 4Y1. It was a dream come true for Ferrari lovers. Mossport Racetrack was the site for a celebration of the Ferrari and its remarkable 42-year history. Owners and would-be owners showed up on a damp day to admire and drive their favorite Ferrari. It was all for a good cause.
It started because Louis Bruzio, the owner of Gentry Lane, bought an F40 and was anxious that some people who might not otherwise have an opportunity to get in a car like that would have that chance. We made it a charity event so that the proceeds paid by the people who had a chance to ride in the car went to a hospital for sick children. He brought his GTO with him to the track as well to double a track time for people, and we have those two cars running for charity today. He has brought with him a 348 Ferrari, which is a new model brought out by them, an entry-level car, and a 512 TR, which is the new style Testarossa, just now available to the public. He's also brought the old style Testarossa, and the 512 TR, the Testarossa, and the 348 are available for free rides, and we have celebrity race car drivers driving them, so it won't be dull out in the track. Starting with the GTO, it was a 1985 model. There were roughly 290 of them made in the world. It's a twin turbo car, limited production. And it is not street legal in Canada, although it is in the States, and it is essentially a racing car which has been legalized for the street in the United States. Very lightweight, under 3,000 pounds, and it has close to 400 horsepower. It's awesome. The F40 was an evolution of the GTO, again a twin turbo V8. Horsepower was up about 100. It's even lighter with the Kevlar body panels, and it's even faster, if that's possible. The 348 is a twin overhead cam V8 mid-engine car, a very exciting car to drive, and its performance was very close to the old style Testarossa. So the Testarossa was given a power increase and a cosmetic makeover, bigger brakes, and evolved into the 512 TR. They peaked about 2 years ago, and each of them were trading at about $1.5 million US. The market's off considerably, and the F40 would be worth about 600 Canadian now. The GTO would be closer to $1 million Canadian.
Do you have a favorite Ferrari?
The F40. Last year was the GTO, but having driven the F40 today, the power and the grip on lateral acceleration are just staggering, and I've wanted to drive one for eons, ever since the car first came out, and I've had my chance today and it didn't disappoint.
Our Midas tip of the week is going to help your car keep its cool. One of the key things to remember here with coolant is it's so important to check it periodically. Everybody seems to forget the basics. They don't check oil and coolant. Those are the two lifelines of your engine. We're going to talk about coolant this week. Key thing to remember in servicing cooling systems, make sure that you do this coolant level check with a cold engine. If the engine's been hot and running, you have to wait a minimum 1 hour before you inspect this system. Now, most cars today have an opaque coolant overflow, so if you give the car a shake, you'll actually see the level. You can see the coolant sloshing around in that container. And I don't even have to remove the cap on this thing to do that. But if this was low, I'd fill this with equal parts of antifreeze and water. Now, if this overflow reservoir becomes empty, I have to verify the level in the rad now. I don't know. It could be down ½ an inch. It could be full. It could be completely empty. There again, make sure it's cool and press down on the radiator cap and turn to the left and it'll release. Set it aside. You can now see the coolant level in the rad. This one happens to be right full, but if it was empty, there again, refill with equal parts of antifreeze and water. Now keep in mind that in a pinch you can use water only to limp it back to the shop. That's better than nothing at all. That's your Midas tip of the week.
They used to make car parts in that factory. Now they make them in Mexico. I got a wake-up call for Canadian car workers next on Kenzies Corner.
Kenzies Corner with Jim Kenzie.
I've got a message for Canadian car workers and for any of their American brothers and sisters who might be listening in. I'm particularly talking to those of you who've been on strike sometime in the last few months looking for another $1 an hour or some guarantee that you're going to have your same job for the rest of your lives. Listen, what cave have you guys been living in? Don't you have TVs and newspapers where you live? Have you never heard of the North American Free Trade Agreement? Don't you realize there's some guy down in Mexico who's prepared to do your job for a week for what you get paid for an hour? And with the internationalization of the car business, the car makers can move their production anywhere they like. Even BMW, as German a car maker as it gets, is opening a plant in Union-free South Carolina because they're fed up with the demands of German unions. Now, if you have no sympathy for your employers, and sometimes I can understand that, have a little sympathy for your fellow union members. Because of just-in-time inventory systems, a strike in a small components factory, say in Ohio someplace, can close down factories in California, Michigan, and Ontario and put thousands of your brothers and sisters out of work. Even the Saturn operation, one of the few bright spots for General Motors these days, was closed down recently for just that reason. And another thing, all the Japanese car makers have North American transplant operations now, but there's a lot of concern in the market that you guys can't even build Japanese cars right. Now, I know there are surveys that show that Civics from Alliston and Corollas from Cambridge are superior to their counterparts from Japan. But if just one customer has a problem with a North American-built Japanese car, he's going to tell all his friends that you guys just can't cut it. Now, personally, I believe North American car makers, especially Canadian car makers, are the equal of anybody in the world. But don't kid yourself. The general public has no reserve of goodwill towards you. Canadians that have lousy paying jobs, or maybe no jobs at all, would love to have your $20 an hour. So before you take your next strike action, give your heads a bit of a shake. Get your eye on the big picture and realize that you have to compete in a worldwide market. Otherwise, we might see you in the Pogie lineup before too long. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Well, that's it for this week. Before we go, I want to show you the most popular 4x4 in Marrakesh. It's not a Range Rover. Here he is, but it comes a little cheaper than a Range Rover. You can get one of these for $100. You can't beat that. Well, I'm off for a test drive. We'll see you next week for more stories about cars and donkeys and the people who drive them. Okay, let's go. Yeah, right. Okay.
Motoring 93 has been brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, your under-the-car specialists for imports and domestics.